All right, welcome to episode 81 of the At Bad podcast presented by War Media, where we give you our thoughts on the latest Chicago baseball news, as well as take a trip around the league. I am Saul Rodriguez. Today, I'm joined by my co-host Miles Porter,
Yes,
and
sir.
we have a great episode for us, man. And of course, we'll talk a little bit of the Shota Imanaga right now, because of course, finally the Cubs got somebody.
We did something.
I can't believe it. Yeah, I can't believe it. But most importantly, though, in this episode, we have a guest, and we have DodgersNation.com reporter, BBWA writer, jphoornstra will be joining us. We're talking Dodgers. We're talking Cubs, White Sox. He talked a little bit about Dylan Cease, as well as you asked him a little bit about Tyler Glasnow. We talked about how Ohtani's going to fit into that lineup. So we talked about a lot of stuff and a lot of insight. So great to have him on. But first, of course, like I said, the Cubs finally signed a free agent, and that's left-handed Japanese pitcher Shota Imanaga, who is a left-handed starter.
Mhm.
Uh, First of all, Miles, what were your reactions when you saw that notification? Because man, I had to read that like 3 times because I was like, "What?" And obviously, of course, reportedly, because of course, as we were recording this on a Wednesday, as much as they said it's they've agreed on it, nothing's official yet. But of course, at the same time, they're gonna do the physical and all that. But initial thoughts on the Cubs reportedly signing Shota Imanaga, man.
Thank you for doing something. I really appreciate it. Like, oh my gosh, it's been such an off season where we're coming off with so much momentum from last year, and we're seeing everyone else make moves and doing something, and we're as Cubs fans, we're sitting here thinking to ourselves, okay, when are we gonna get in on this? So I'm happy about it, and I like this guy's stuff. I think he has great movement with his breaking pitches. He's not someone who's going to blow you away, but I think he has some really nice finesse with it. So I like it. I like it. We got a left-hander in that bullpen. So I mean, going forward, yeah, I'm very happy. Now, is he going to be a starter for us, or is he going to come out of the pen? That's the only thing I'm not clear on.
I think no, I think he's gonna be a starter. Yeah,
Oh,
as
amazing!
far
Even
I
better.
know, I know. So yeah, so good question because he does he does have experience. I believe as a swingman, right? I've
Right.
heard of
Yeah.
that. I
That's
heard
where.
that.
Yeah.
But I do know. I mean, I do expect him to be a starter just because of the need.
Yes.
Um. Uh. But I will say that it does raise that question of how they're going to utilize them because
Right.
that does. I mean, it's pretty interesting because um the way that the Cubs have young pitching coming up,
Hmm.
Imanaga might be even a more dangerous piece. Later on in the year, later on in 2025. Yeah, no, you're right. That's the great part about Imanaga is how versatile he is. I think that's the one thing that I don't
Hmm.
think has been talked about enough.
Yeah.
And you mentioned it. He's not going to blow you away,
Right.
and that's the one thing people were talking about as well is his fastball that he doesn't hit you with the 101 or anything like that, but his fastball has some movement to it, and I think
Yeah.
that's a lot. It says a lot, and I think that it's going to be really interesting to see because most likely also there's a good chance that he goes out there against the Dodgers at Wrigley Field and takes on Ohtani, and that would be pretty badass to see because we
Oh.
saw in the World Baseball Classic, Imanaga blow away some great U.S. hitters
Yes.
like Mike
Yes.
Trout, for example. So
Mhm.
he's not gonna blow you away with the radar, but he's gonna make you go back to the bench real quick with some of his pitches, especially his breaking pitches. So yeah, really exciting. And we're in January, and we even talk about it with JP. The Cubs with their first signing of the offseason. They still got time to do more, and I think they will do more. I think this is just a start with Cubs convention coming up this weekend. I think they definitely avoided catastrophe because some people were like, "Man, are they going to boo or are they going to boo Jed or whatever?" The Ricketts aren't going to be there anyway. But
Yeah.
I'm glad they did something, and I'm glad that it's going in the right direction because
Yeah.
I have heard, of course, that they have made offers, of course, to Jordan Montgomery, to other players out there like Chapman as well. So
Yeah.
they're definitely active, but it's all about players coming here. So
Yeah.
hopefully it works out, and you'll love to see any positive attraction for the Cubs. But like I said, we have an interview with JP Hoornstra from DodgersNation.com. It was a great conversation. We talk all things Dodgers and a little bit of Cubs. We asked him how the Dodgers picked Jason Heyward, because I mean everybody wants to know. The world wants to know.
Taking care of our boy over there, man.
Yeah.
Take care of our boy.
And you know what? After everything that he's been through, Chicago won the World Series, good. But whether he did anything positive on the offensive side for us, he was always a great guy, and I'm happy, truly happy to see him thriving in LA,
Yeah.
and hopefully he does it again and even better in 2024. So exactly. So we'll send it off to our interview portion with JP Hoornstra. All right, welcome to the interview portion of the show. Today we have an author, a member of the Baseball Writers Association of America, and the editor for DodgersNation.com, JP Hoornstra. Thanks for coming on, JP. Really appreciate it, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course. The Dodgers have been the talk of baseball, and you could even argue the talk of sports, honestly, this offseason, with huge acquisitions like Shohei Ohtani, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Tyler Glasnow, and most recently, Teoscar Hernandez, who signed on a one-year deal. As a whole, JP, how does this offseason compare to all the ones you've covered? Does this one in particular trump them all?
I think in terms of the overall star power, absolutely. To say nothing of the money, I don't think this is. I can't imagine any sports team has ever committed more money to free agents in a single offseason than the Dodgers just have. Obviously, Ohtani's contract set a record for baseball and for all of sports. He's an international superstar. I think the Japanese media and fan contingent was already going to have all eyes on the Dodgers, and then they went out and signed Yamamoto as well. And as far as I'm concerned, getting Glasnow and Hernandez were just really icing on the cake. I can think back to the Angels signing Albert Pujols, for example. That was a really big deal when it happened, and Pujols was already going to be a Hall of Famer when he signed that contract. But unlike the Angels, I want to say 2011, that was, the Dodgers just kept going. And there are even whispers now that they might be in the trade market to upgrade their roster even further. So we've got about a month to go before pitchers and catchers report to spring training, and it's already made history.
Yeah, it's that's the thing that people have been talking about, whether it be how they're getting better, whether it be getting players through the signing free agents or whatever. But yeah, they're not done yet. And I think that's the one thing that I like about the Dodgers is that they don't. It's never enough, and that I respect that, because it's one of those things people hate on the Dodgers and all this, and it's like from a certain fan bases, and it's like, dude, you wish your team was doing that too. And that's kind of how we look at it too. Like, as of course we're a Chicago-based podcast, and that's one of the things that we hear from Cubs fans is that, hey, you wish the Cubs were doing that too, especially for the sense of the Cubs just signed their first free agent of the offseason. So it's like compared to what the Dodgers are doing, it's crazy. But another thing, we mentioned Ohtani, of course, from the free agent perspective. He will be a hitter only in 2024, obviously. How do you see him fitting in the lineup? Because he obviously fits in well with any lineup, of course. But how do you think Dave Roberts will utilize him with the rest of the guys that's in the lineup? Obviously, you got Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Will Smith, just to name a few. How do you think they're going to go about it and set up that lineup?
That's a good question. I think Betts, Freeman, and Ohtani are probably going to be 1 through 3 in some order. If you asked me to predict which order, I would probably say that's it. That's Freeman and Ohtani. But you could make an argument for doing it multiple configurations of that group. Historically, the Dodgers have preferred to alternate right-handers and left-handers. So, Ohtani, Betts, Freeman makes a ton of sense from that point of view. You turn the lineup over a couple times, the manager's thinking, should I go to the righty or the lefty? And by staggering the right-handers and left-handers that way, it makes it a lot harder on opposing managers. I think the only complication there is that Mookie Betts really likes hitting leadoff. And given the success that he had in that spot last season, it's kind of hard to argue with him there. Ohtani's hit first, second, third, fourth. I think he's more flexible in that regard. Freeman batting behind Betts has been such a good combination for the Dodgers and for Freeman in particular. I mean, the last 2 years have been arguably, I would say 2 of the 3 best of his career. And so you kind of want to keep that going. I imagine Ohtani hits third, and all I would promise you beyond that is that a right-hander hits fourth.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a good problem to have, right? It's, having a plethora of guys that are just, I mean, not only MVPs, but just stars and I think with Ohtani in particular, I mean, that's just, yeah, it's going to be an insane lineup. But the other big fish that, of course, the Dodgers got was 26-year-old right-hander Yoshinobu Yamamoto. The Dodgers gave him a 12-year, $325 million deal. A lot of has been made of, oh, he's never pitched an inning in the big leagues. What's your response to that? Because nowadays scouting has evolved, obviously. So you can tell more of how a guy will pitch in the majors. You can project a little better now, and I think also, not to mention, you just look at Yamamoto's sinker, like a video that I think you show it to anybody, and you just know that that's going to be nasty no matter where he's pitching. So, how do you react to somebody when they're saying, "Hey, this guy's getting this amount of money, never pitched a day in the big leagues"?
Yeah, having talked to some scouts who saw Yamamoto in person in Japan, the talk is really not if he was the best pitcher coming over from Japan this offseason, but really the best pitcher coming over from Japan ever. And in the eyes of scouts, it's really a toss-up between him and Yu Darvish. Darvish similarly had great stuff, like some of the best in the big leagues. The guy's got like 12 pitches or something stupid like that. The problem for Darvish was always just, did he know how to use it in the best way possible to get major league hitters out? And I think Yamamoto still has to answer that question, because people who are saying, why would you give a 12-year contract to this guy? He's never pitched a big league inning. That's true. He hasn't. But I would point to his track record in Japan. I mean, he's had an ERA in the ones the last 3 seasons. That's the best league outside of MLB on the planet. I mean, if your team had a prospect, 23, 24, 25 years of age, putting up a 1 ERA over, a full season's worth of work, 170 plus innings every year, you would be like, why is this guy still in the minors? We got to call him up. And I think that's really what the Dodgers are thinking here, is that he's done that work already at a very high level for a very long time. You can question the 12-year contract, and I think that's really a byproduct of timing as much as anything. I think in a different offseason, maybe Yamamoto isn't the best free agent pitcher available. Maybe, if he and Garrett Cole, for example, were free agents in the same year, you might not necessarily see the bidding get that high. But the truth is, outside of him and Blake Snell, once Aaron Nola re-signed with Philly so quickly, you really couldn't make a case for anybody else as like the bona fide number 1 starter in Major League Baseball, just given the level of talent and the track record, other than Yamamoto. So I think the 12-year contract is a gamble. There are some, protections baked in. So like, for example, if Yamamoto has Tommy John surgery, the Dodgers get an extra year before he can opt out. And there are 2 opt-outs for Yamamoto. So if he overperforms in those first 6 or 7 years, depending on his health, he can opt out and test the market again at age 32 or 33. So it's a good contract for both sides. Is it expensive? Is it long? Yes, but hey, that's free agency. Sometimes that's the price you have to pay.
Yeah, of course, and not to mention when you have the type of contract that Ohtani has, it helps the organization with the formatting of other contracts. And but yeah, like, I think that's one of the things that I found fascinating too, is just the way that they set up their contracts and have done that, and like they're not going to start paying certain contracts like 2028 and all that. So it sets them up for a good time, and since then up until now. Or up until then, I should say. Who's a guy that I also don't think is talked about enough is Gavin Lux. I feel like, the expectations for Lux have been there, when he's played and when he's been healthy, which he's had trouble being. I mean, last year, of course, he missed the entire season, but it looks like he's going into 2024 as the starting shortstop for the Dodgers. What do you think that the Dodgers can expect from him? Because this is a guy who's fast. He takes his walks. And he's only 26 years old. We're talking about age. Yamamoto is only 26 years old. You look at Gavin Lux, he's only 26. So he still has a lot to offer. He still, is a guy that has a lot to prove. So what do you think fans can expect from Lux this season?
Yeah, this is the guy who is a former first-round draft pick by the Dodgers, made the majors very quickly, really forced his way in by just hitting the cover off the ball at AAA in, I want to say, 2019. ever since then, it's really been uneven. I mean, the COVID year was kind of uneven for everybody, but for Lux in particular, you mentioned the knee injury that cost him all of last season. Some of the struggles that he's had on defense, I think, made, if not internally, then certainly externally, fans were questioning, okay, where does this guy really play on the field? And you're right. So for the Dodgers to not re-sign Trey Turner and say, all right, Gavin Lux, you're our starting shortstop, that was a bit of a leap in the eyes of many. And he, I think, more than his bat, had a lot to prove with his glove going into last season. And assuming he's healthy, which by all reports he is, that's going to be the case again this year. And given that you're playing Max Muncy at third base, not exactly like the rangiest, slickest fielder over there at third. So the left side defense of the infield, if you're really going to point out the flaw in the Dodgers ointment right now, that might be it. So for Gavin Lux to have a good season in the field, I think will be a good season in the eyes of the organization. The bat, he's really answered questions with. He's probably going to hit ninth in this lineup, which, like you mentioned, with his speed, gives them a chance to turn the lineup over. You put him on base ahead of Betts, Freeman, and Ohtani. That's a really good position to be in if you're the Dodgers, to have that luxury to roll Gavin Lux out as your number 9 hitter. But I'm going to reserve judgments on his ability at shortstop until I see it in spring training, because nobody's seen a lot of it. It's been a while. I know he's working his tail off to be better at it, but to trust relatively young player still with the arguably most important defensive position, certainly on the infield, if not the whole field, that's going to be something very intriguing to watch about the Dodgers in 2024.
I've always been fascinated just by the Dodgers organization. And I think one of my main questions is, on top of all the moves that have been made this year, and just the excitement around this organization, you know, I see it on TV. I've never been. What makes Dodger Stadium so special compared to other ballparks? Because we always hear players talk about it. I kind of see it on TV. I hear the organ, I hear the energy. But what is it like there? What is so appealing about it to players that just love to go there and perform for the fans?
Yeah, there's a lot. I would highlight two things. Number one is that the capacity is, I want to say 56,000, 54,000, somewhere in there. And the fact that they're able to fill it as often as they are, and if not literally sell it out, then at least to get something in the 40s, like at minimum every night, is just, it's ridiculous. It's incomparable. So you put 40,000 fans in any stadium, and it's just going to be an atmosphere that is very rare in sports, certainly in baseball. Other than that, I think the thing that I have come to appreciate about Dodger Stadium, especially in the last, let's say, 20 years, is they build ballparks now to look like they were built in the 60s, but they obviously weren't. And in some cases, that's great. Like, the bathrooms are functional, the parking logistics are smooth, et cetera, et cetera. There are things you can complain about at Dodger Stadium that maybe don't have that. But literally, it's the ballpark that they build other ballparks to try to look like. It's not like a retro ballpark made to look like it was old. It's the genuine article, and it's been wonderfully preserved from the condition that it was intended to be maintaining in 1962, the day it opened. And just the fact that it's been in that location, and it's been really a central hub for Dodger fans for generations now, and it hasn't changed that much, is really a testament to its staying power. And certainly that's why fans enjoy it. They've upgraded the amenities for players. That's probably why they enjoy it more. But once you get into the ballpark, traffic sucks. There's no way around it. But once you get into the ballpark, it is a really fun experience.
Yeah, I love that, especially just coming from someone who's been going to Cubs games his entire life. I really appreciate, classic stadiums that just, the atmosphere of like classical baseball. And, as Saul talked about earlier in the podcast, Dodgers have made some huge moves. How good do you think this is for not only Dodgers but for baseball in general, just becoming such a worldwide game? And we look up to these guys, and it's cool seeing players from different parts of the world, and anyone could find someone to who they can identify with and go from there. How big do you think that is for the Dodgers or baseball in general?
Well, I think for the Dodgers, it was weird last season to see them, I don't want to say sit out free agency, but just only give out 1-year contracts to veterans who, were gambles in some way.
Yeah.
It wasn't like this offseason. And I mean, like I told Saul, the this offseason is really unique in a lot of ways. So the Dodgers can't do this every year. Few teams can do whatever. But I think given the way that last offseason went, it's like, okay, when are you guys going to spend? And now finally this offseason, we got the answer. Okay, the Dodgers, a team that has the financial resources of the Dodgers actually is going to flex that financial might. I think that's healthy for the team, for the fans, and for Major League Baseball. But in terms of like branding and whatnot, I don't think it hurts Major League Baseball to have just a villain, for 29 other teams to point to and say, okay, we got to knock these guys off their high horse. Like, that's never a bad thing. Yeah, it sucks if you were one of the finalists for Ohtani or for Yamamoto. If you were talking to the Rays about getting Tyler Glasnow and you lost on all of those excellent players to the same team. It sucks to be the Giants right now. Like, there's really no other way to put it.
That poor division.
Yeah, I know. And then like the Giants probably needed those guys more than the Dodgers. So if they're screaming injustice, I get it. It's not fair sometimes. But I think that for the Dodgers, given the history of the franchise, given their longevity in Major League Baseball, to have that be a recognizable brand on two continents, if not more, is a really good thing for baseball in general. And we'll see if it raises the profile, raises the visibility of the sport to where it's kind of narrowing that gap with the NFL, because it's a pretty big gap right now.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I think that's the best part about the Shohei thing is that I don't care where he signed. Like, it's one of those things where I think in this part of the country, some people had hope. Oh, Ohtani maybe to the Cubs, but really, if you were really following baseball, you kind of knew that he never really wanted to come here. It just wasn't part of the plan. Even beforehand, it never really looked like it. So I was like, man, anywhere he went, it's going to be a positive for baseball. And we saw that when he signed there. I mean, I had friends, that don't even watch baseball talking about Ohtani and the contract and all that. So that's all good for the game. So, you love to see it. The last Dodgers related question actually helps us transition a little bit to the Chicago side of things. But man, what I want to know is, how did the Dodgers fix Jason Heyward? Because he will forever be a Cubs legend, whether it be his speech or his defense was great the whole time he was here. Unfortunately, the bat was the part that was never with us, and it was 85 OPS plus with the Cubs in 7 seasons. He goes out to LA, has a 117 OPS plus, and he gets on base at a 340 clip. What do you think changed with him, and what do you expect from him in 2024? Can he follow that up? Like, how does the team feel about Jason Heyward, who I feel like was honestly more of an important part to their 2023 team than a lot of people, honestly talked about.
Yeah, and I think the fact that the Dodgers brought him back as quickly as they did spoke to that. They could have waited. They could have said, all right, well, let's see who else we can get to fill that role. And they're like, no, let's get Jason Heyward even before we sign Yamamoto and Ohtani and all these other guys. I'm glad you mentioned the speech. It's like the most famous speech that we have no actual transcript of. I still have no idea what he said, but we all know the speech, right?
Yeah.
With respect to like specific things that the Dodgers did, I think I can point to 2 things. Number one, if you just look at his swing in 2023 compared to years past, there's a lot less to it. It's a lot more simplified. You can still see how he has that kind of timing mechanism when he brings his hand back and then forward before he actually like winds up to swing. There's still a little bit of a timing mechanism in there, but it's not complicated. It's very straightforward. And I think that just allows him to get the bat to the ball quicker, which is pretty much everything for a hitter. But then more than that, they also really limited his exposure to left-handed pitching, which is something that the Dodgers have done just year after year after year under Andrew Friedman, is saying, look, I don't care what you've done in the past. If you are a much stronger hitter against either lefties or righties, you are going to play most, if not all, of your games against lefties or righties. Heyward, like I said, he's not the first to fill that role, but to his credit, I think he accepted it, and he accepted it humbly, and he didn't complain about not getting more playing time. He said, yeah, I not verbatim, obviously. We don't know his speeches, but I'm guessing that he said to Dave Roberts at some point, yeah, if Mookie Betts is going to be the right fielder when I'm not there, fine. Make Mookie Betts the right fielder when I'm not there. And it was clearly a combination that worked for both sides. And, I think it was pretty easy for the Dodgers part to say, let's bring this guy back. But Heyward, accepted the role and liked it so much that he signed up for another year. So kudos to them.
Yeah, I think with the speech, I think all we know is that, what's talked about a lot, right, is that Aroldis Chapman was in shambles and that brought him back to life. So I think that's all. We don't know what he said, but that's true. I do want to know what he said. That's one thing I do always hear that people want to know exactly. But hey, whatever happened, we'll just keep it that way as long as they won. So go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I think that's a good question because it makes me think about, how can the Dodgers take care of Tyler Glass now? Do you think that there's a specific plan in him, a plan in place for him in terms of like an innings limit or how they want to go about, how they're going to stretch him out through the year? Because it's cool. It makes me very happy to see our beloved Jason Heyward have such a great 2023 campaign. Do you think they can do the same thing, something similar pitching wise for Glass now?
The interesting thing about Glass now is that he had this internal brace injury, and it's supposed to be like a somewhat modified version of a traditional Tommy John that allows pitchers to just return to their previous form faster. And if you look at what Glasnow did last year, once he was healthy, and kind of bake in the fact that a little farther removed from surgery could be even better, I don't think the Dodgers have to do much. I think they just have to give him the ball and see what he can do, and then go from there. If he says he needs an extra day between starts, the Dodgers are typically quick to do that with their starting pitchers. I think the majority of their starts have been on an extra day's rest going back 5 years now, which I think a lot of people aren't aware of outside of LA or even inside. So Glasnow will get his rest. He'll get his chance to be a leader in the starting rotation to show what he can do and to, really put his money where his mouth is, because he's come out and said, I'm healthy. I feel better than ever. Now he just really has to go on a mound and prove it.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it as well with Tyler Glasnow is the teams that missed out. Cubs were of course one of the teams that missed out on that. I think one of the running jokes now is that Tyler Glasnow is the new Jake Peavy because in the late 2000s, of course, Cubs were like, oh, they're gonna get Peavy, and it never happened. Glasnow seems like that now too, unfortunately. But another Chicago related question I had for you was. On the South side, there's a lot of expectation when it comes to the return that the Sox will get for right-hander Dylan Cease. Do you still believe the Dodgers will be in the running for Cease? Because you added they added Glass onto the team, but they're still. I feel like even then, as we mentioned, they're never done. So do you think they're still in there? To get Cease because there's other teams out there as well. The Orioles, that the Reds even were interested in him. But do you see the Dodgers being one of their better fits?
That's a good question. I think so, just in terms of the prospect capital that they have available to trade. I don't think their rotation necessarily needs Dylan Cease. I think that if you look at the back end of the Dodgers rotation and you look at just how young their projected 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th starters are, it's really hard to project anybody who could step in case of injury and take down a lot of innings. Do you need that pitcher to be as good as Dylan Cease? Not necessarily, especially if he's your 5th starter. But having said that, the Dodgers have shown that they can take Joe Kelly out of Chicago and make him look a lot better than the White Sox did. Yeah. Even Lance Lynn, it's not like he was great as a Dodger, but he was better in LA than he was in Chicago. So I think that change of scenery has benefited pitchers in the past, and it's, I think, fair to assume that the same would be said for Cease as well. One thing I will say, though, is that this has been a weird offseason. I mean, normally I would say if a pitcher who's on the trading block has gone this long without being traded, just wait until the trade deadline. Odds are he's probably not going to get moved until sort of the demand among teams who are contending for World Series increases, which is usually around late July, early August. The only thing that makes this situation unique is because Ohtani held up the market for so long, and then Yamamoto held up the market for so long, and now it's kind of not totally, but somewhat normaled out where you've got Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery waiting to sign, and there's somewhat of a drop off after that. Now that Imanaga's going to be a Cub. I don't really know who the 3rd best starting pitcher on the free agent market is, but I can totally see a scenario where teams who are in the running for Snell, teams who are in the running for Jordan Montgomery, whether that's the Yankees or the Giants or the Angels, will pivot and say, all right, we lost out on our top targets. There are no clear number 1 starters left. Let's go out and make a trade for Dylan Cease and put together the best package that we can. do. I mean, we've seen the White Sox and the Angels line up on trades in the very recent
Mhm.
past. I think that was before Chris Getz was general manager, so maybe there would be a slightly different process of
Mhm.
getting to know you in place and learning how Perry Manassian and Chris Getz trade with one another. But
Mhm.
I could see that happening, sure, if the Angels line up fail to sign Blake Snell, who they're rumored to be in. And in that case, now you're looking at teams who need Dylan Cease a lot more than the Dodgers. So I think on paper there's a good fit, but in reality, supply and demand just drives so much of what we see in the offseason that if a team gets really desperate, there will be teams more desperate for starting pitching than the Dodgers. If one of them puts together a trade package, sure, Dylan Cease could get moved in the next month, but in the back of my mind, I'm just thinking usually if it's January and we're talking about somebody who could be traded but isn't, it's probably going to wait until the trade deadline.
Yeah, I think though this is what is very interesting to me at the moment because the Dodgers have assembled themselves the way they have, and I don't think that there's a team that's exactly built better at the moment. Is there any matchups, this coming season that you're looking forward to? Braves, Dodgers, uh, that's really like the main matchup that comes to my head because I just think that these are two fun teams to watch when they play each other, or Dodgers, Yankees potentially in the World Series, and I know they're going to play each other at least once this year. And are there any matchups that come to mind for you that you're just like, man, I can't wait to see that series?
Yeah, I think if you look at what the Braves have done this offseason, that's really the first place I would point. I
Mhm.
mean, start with the fact that these teams have met, boy, I want to say 3 times in the last 6 years in the NLCS. That's a really fun matchup. Not NLCS, but postseason. Those have been really fun matchups. I think they're the two best teams in the National League on paper, probably in all of Major League Baseball on paper in terms of the way that they're built. And what was fun about it this offseason for me was seeing the Braves go out and trade for Chris Sale, which was somewhat of a surprise, even more of a surprise to see them extend his contract given all
Yeah.
the
Mhm.
injuries he's had in the past few years. But how is that not like a response to the Dodgers getting Shohei Ohtani? Right?
Mhm.
It's like, the one team that has the best chance of knocking us off in the postseason just send the best left-handed hitter in baseball, arguably. Maybe let's go out and get a left-handed starter. And then the Dodgers are like, oh, well, if you're going to sign trade for and sign Chris Sale, well, we're going to go out and get a really good right-handed hitter. They signed Teoscar Hernandez. And
Mhm.
it's really hard for me not to put those moves in the context of this arms race. That's really fun to watch. You could argue that the Giants did somewhat similar, going out and trading for Robbie Ray. Ray didn't pitch last season. He's not expected to be back in the second half. And if the Giants can do enough to put together a good team between now and then, maybe that could make for some good, uh, at least August and September matchups, if not October. So that was kind of interesting to watch. Giants Dodgers is always a good rivalry. Giants have a lot of catching up to do. The Diamondbacks did represent the National League in the World Series last year, so let's not count them out. And they have a lot of young players who probably are entering the prime of their careers. And I can't really dismiss them as we stand here today. But just on paper, Dodgers and the Braves are the two best teams in the National League, and they're clearly going at each other's throats here with these offseason transactions. So that's been really fun to watch.
Exciting stuff.
Yeah, and those two teams, juggernauts, and I think I can't wait to see them match up in the playoffs again. But obviously the Cubs, like I said, have signed their first free agent in the offseason with Shota Imanaga, and the Dodgers, of course, were in the running for that because, of course, they were right. So, what are your thoughts on Imanaga and just him going to Chicago and what that does for the Cubs, for example? Because this is a team that, I think with Chicago baseball, it's in a funny spot because, the White Sox were going up, then they're going down, and then the Cubs finally going back up. And then, a lot of people feel they should have made the playoffs last year, but, of course, the Diamondbacks finished ahead of them, and look at them. They went to the World Series. So they're not too far, but they obviously still need some pieces that need to add. As well as former Dodger Bellinger, who of course is still out in the market, might return with. But what are your thoughts on Imanaga and just the Cubs offseason as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, the same scouts who I spoke to about Ohtani and Yamamoto, gave me the lowdown on Imanaga. He's really not in that tier of
Mhm.
pitcher, but as far as left-handers available on the market, after Snell, Imanaga was a pretty good choice in terms of just what you can expect on a per inning basis. Um, I never got the sense that the Dodgers were as close with him as they were on some of the other free agents that they ultimately signed. but the need there for the Chicago Cubs was clear. They had not signed a major league free agent all offseason, which, if you're the Rockies, that's one thing, but the Cubs clearly had been signaling that they were intending to make some big moves this offseason, had the money to spend, and just to this point hadn't. And I don't know what's going on in Cody Bellinger's mind right now, but I would have to think that seeing the Cubs get somebody to make their roster better makes them a more attractive destination if it comes down to, say, the Cubs and the Yankees, or a couple other teams who could be interested in signing Cody Bellinger. I think this helps. With respect to Bellinger, we talked about Jason Heyward and what the Dodgers did to fix him, so to speak. You take everything I just said and apply it to Cody Bellinger, because he did not look great at the end of his tenure in Los Angeles, and he was just really a different hitter in Chicago. And I don't know if losing Grant Brown to the Mariners is a big deal. Some people internally have suggested to me that having that coach present for Cody Bellinger was really instrumental to his turnaround. I don't know if it was just the environment or the change of scenery, which is, I think, what he suggested when he came to visit Dodger Stadium with the Cubs in, I want to say, April of last year. He said that change of scenery did him a lot of good. And, as the season played out, we saw it happen. Why you wouldn't want to go back to that scenery is beyond me. If it worked for you once, it probably could work for you in the future. But the Cubs need to do more. You're right. I think even after signing Imanaga, if they were to sign a Snell or a Montgomery, it would be totally worth the investment, given their resources and their ambitions, and the fact that the NL Central is looking really winnable right now. I can't remember the Cardinals and the Brewers being this bad on paper, to be honest with you. It's been a while. So the division is right there for the Cubs taking, and if they want to go any farther in the postseason, we talked about the Braves and the Dodgers and what they've been doing. You're going to need a better roster to compete with those guys. So I'm eager to see what they can do.
Yeah, 100%. And there's still some time left, so hopefully they get some more done. But I think that's a good place to wrap things up. I want to thank you, JP Hoornstra, for joining us. Hopefully we can have you some other time. If you want to follow JP, follow him at JP Hoornstra. And, of course, check out DodgersNation.com. Thanks for joining us, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.